After serving about a year in prison, though, Mr. Cohen got out, and he was transitioned effectively to home confinement. And the reason he got out then is because of COVID. It wasn't special treatment for him. It doesn't appear to have been. This happened to a lot of prisoners at the time. But a seriously crazy thing happened to him right after that, something that appears to have been very specifically designed for him. Just a few weeks after he was sent home because of COVID, the Bureau of Prisons revoked his home confinement and decided that even though he'd only been home for a couple of weeks, they were going to send him right back to prison. And because they said he had broken the rules about what you're allowed to do while you're on home confinement. Well, what is the rule that he had broken? What did he do to get his release revoked and to have himself thrown back in federal prison? Turns out what he had done is he had written a book critical of then President Donald Trump, and had started speaking publicly on social media about the forthcoming publication of that book. The problem with that scenario, as I just laid it out, is that that's not actually against the rules for people who are out on home confinement like he was in that moment. It appears, and this is contested, but it appears that under the Trump administration, federal prison officials drafted a special rule just for Michael Cohen that said he couldn't write a book or talk to anybody in the news media or post anything online, a special rule just for him. And as I say, this is contested, but I'm also pretty confident in saying this is what appears to have happened, because it's not just me who's asserting it, and it's not just Michael Cohen who's asserting it. A federal judge says that's what happened. After they shackled Michael Cohen back up again and sent him back to prison for the grave crime of him writing a book and saying it was going to be published, last July, a federal judge in New York ruled that Cohen actually had to be released again. And further, the judge ruled explicitly that the Trump administration had locked Michael Cohen up, had revoked his home confinement and put him back in prison in retaliation for him writing this book that was critical of then President Trump. The judge said in his ruling, quote, "The purpose in transferring Cohen from release on furlough and home confinement back to custody was retaliatory in response to Cohen desiring to exercise his First Amendment rights to publish a book critical of the president and to discuss the book on social media." Federal judge proclaims this to have been an unconstitutional act, an illegal act of retaliation against him, orders him freed. And it is, it's one thing for a person like Michael Cohen's former boss, Donald Trump, to threaten Michael Cohen, shake his fist at him, criticize him, to maybe personally retaliate against him. You lay down with dogs, you get up with fleas. But it's a much bigger problem for all of us if any president so motivated can employ the Federal Bureau of Prisons and the Department of Justice to carry out that kind of retaliation with all the power and compulsory force of the United States government. I mean, Trump might have loved to say, lock her up about Hillary Clinton. And, he threatened during the presidential debates in 2016, that if he became president, she'd find herself in jail. He never did that, of course. But he did actually lock up Michael Cohen. And a federal judge ruled that the reason Michael Cohen was locked up was because of retaliation against him for criticizing Trump. They actually put him in prison for doing that. That's what a federal judge says what happened when he ordered Cohen freed. Well, now, Mr. Cohen has filed a new lawsuit against Trump, and also, importantly, against Trump's last Attorney General, William Barr, who was head of the Justice Department at the time all this happened. He's also filed the suit against a whole variety of federal prison officials who were involved in this mishigas. And I know this might seem like sort of a, new chapter in the ongoing Michael Cohen saga. I know. The personalities here can get distracting. But take the personalities out of this. I mean, a president being a bad guy is one thing. A president being a bad guy and then being able to use the Bureau of Prisons and the Justice Department to go pluck his enemies out of their homes, shackle them and throw them in jail without legitimate cause. That is a blaring red siren, not just for what it means to have a bad person in power, but for what it means to have a government that is bent to that person's will, for what it means to have a government that is insufficiently independent and governed by ethics and law, that an unscrupulous leader can employ the power of the U.S. government in that way for their own purposes. That's a big blaring red siren. And I've always felt about that case that because it's Michael Cohen and because there's so much drama around Michael Cohen, I felt like that case maybe never got taken all that seriously. That's a big deal case in terms of who we are as a country.